This is going to be a special day on this channel. We have been working on this for a couple of weeks. It is a thesis which I was starting to develop and then started talking to Larry Goldberg about, and it has to do with Tesla's move to South Asia, specifically their move to India, but we'll eventually talk about Malaysia and Indonesia. What's going on with not only Tesla, but Apple and others moving towards India? What are the benefits? What are the reasons? What are the geopolitical, technical, logical, etc. reasons? And is this one more case where Elon Musk is playing four-level chess? To help me figure this out, I've got Larry Goldberg. You're all familiar with Larry. He's on all the time, and you love him. He's the only one that you ever say, we love Larry. and then we have Nehal. I'm sorry, last name Trivedi?
Trivedi. Yep.
Trivedi. Oh, wow, first try. Okay. And you are a friend, an associate of Larry's?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
Larry and I are practically neighbors. I'm out here in North Carolina. Met Larry, watched a lot of YouTube videos by you the creators. Learned a lot over the years. It has been a short but really fruitful journey.
Okay, all right. And you also happen to be in our conversation before we started. You happen to be a Tesla. Well, I'm not going to characterize you as a Teslaner. I'll let you make that decision. But apparently, you've made enough money in the last 4 or 5 years off of Tesla stock that you've semi-retired.
I can afford to be. That is correct. Thank you.
Well, good for you. I wish I'd started as early as you did. All right. So we are going to dive in. We're going to let Larry and Nehal start this out with a slide deck. We're going to talk about this whole India situation, what's going on in Asia, what's going on with Tesla and others. Larry, I'll let you take the lead. And, from time to time, I might step in.
You need to enable my screen sharing.
Oh, yeah, that would be good. We have to do that. All right. I promise I'll let you have the part of the screen. All right. There we go.
All right. So Nehal and I, we've been speaking about this for some time, and we've each contributed some thoughts. I have a long history with India. I started a company in partnership with an Indian colleague in India some 18 years ago. It was very successful. I sold my equity to private equity. I sold in very recent years, in 2014, I think I sold my company to another company, to a Israel-based company, and was instrumental in convincing them to open an office in India. That office grew to a 5,000 person operation. And I spent a lot of time traveling backwards and forwards to India. And in fact, that photograph back there is of my team in India.
There you go.
They were, my brothers and sisters, really. I felt a great kinship with them for various reasons. I loved going to India and sharing a lot of time and effort and intellectual ideas with my colleagues in India. So that's my background in India. Nehal grew up and, was educated originally in India, and he'll speak for that. But we put this presentation together and want to share it with you, and then we can talk about Tesla in India. So Nehal, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. I am born and brought up in Gujarat, India. I'm an engineer by training and by trade. Last couple of years has actually really been pivotal in my life, my whole story. In time, it will come out, but I'll go back to the beginning. After graduating from engineering, I have worked for multiple different industries over the years, more than 2 decades of experience in various different roles and whatnot. 2008 rolls around, and I'm going to only focus on the financial side of the things here. So 2008 rolls around, and we all paid the price for the the excesses in the years ahead, earlier. Well, I come across this Jack Bogle and the Bogle heads theory of investing, and I put all of my money in just indexing and forgetting about, day-to-day, involvement in my finances. So from 2008 all the way to 2016, I haven't looked at any of my investments, anything to do with money, just focused on being an engineer, working. All this time, I have been hearing in the background that there is this company called Tesla, and there is this buzz about Model 3 and all that. Being very impatient with my purchases, I was not gonna wait for a Model 3 to roll around 3 years, 4 years into making. So one fine day we buy a Model S that is end of 2016. And this car is phenomenal. I mean, there is nothing like Model S, at this point in the history of the world. I was so fascinated with not only the car, but the story of this company. And that led me to doing more research. And I see the CEO of this company sleeping on the floor, and somebody puts a joke, a banner as a joke in his lap that says bankrupt. And I'm like, what is this all about? So as we look at the 2018s and the 19s and the struggle of this company, I'll just only give one anecdote, which is how they ripped apart the whole production line because they had over-engineered something, and they took all the automation away and put back some of the things automated, some of the things manual. I'm talking about Model 3 production ramp, which is excruciating time period for Elon Musk's life. Long story short, in our trade, that is called failing fast, learning from your mistakes. It is all pretty intense type work. And I made a decision to purchase the first tranches of my Tesla stock with this. The rest is history. I'll give it back to you guys at this point.
So Nehal and I have prepared some numbers and some information, but really the theme here is a sensible arranged marriage. And it's kind of an inside joke because so many marriages in India are arranged marriages. Some of my friends, their marriages were arranged marriages. And I have to say, most of those marriages, all of those marriages that I know of, and there are many of them, have been very happy marriages. So we talk about an arranged marriage because, the move to India for Tesla in many ways is arranged marriage because Tesla had to, as they have done in China, they have to come to terms with the government of India. The government of India, as does China, controls industry very tightly and is very focused on managing the process of, allowing people from the outside to build factories inside India. And they provide very strict conditions. And there was a round or two where Tesla came to India and they couldn't quite come to terms. But now apparently there's talk that terms have been arranged. And we're going to show you why in the next very quick few slides, why we think India is the ideal target for the next Tesla Gigafactory and what the opportunities are. So we'll start with, talking about the kind of numbers that are important. And Nehal, do you want to talk to some of these numbers?
Sure. I'd also like to start with the fact that it is in the mission statement of this particular company to accelerate the world's transition to sustainable energy. India is a population center, 1.4 billion people. So which country is underserved when it comes to EVs, and where can you make the biggest impact? That is my opening base case for Tesla to go into India and do what they do best. The numbers here speak for themselves, right? So the population is pretty clear. The GDP is minuscule in compared to some of the larger economies of this world. But pay attention to projected GDP growth. The GDP growth is higher than some of the other countries, definitely more than the developed countries. Look at how the vehicle unit sales have sort of been on the rise. Lately, it has really expanded. India does not only have gas-fueled and diesel-fueled cars. There are various different fuels being used. CNG is a prevalent fuel. There are two-wheeler, three-wheeler, and four-wheeler different passenger vehicle markets in Indian verticals. Look at how the projected vehicle sales has exploded recently. And then with that, we'd also like to look at the other facts about India, which is, the demographics, the population, and whatnot.
If you look at the demographics of India, they are stunning. So the demographics of India best looked at from the point of view of, the age dispersion of India. So this is going from the oldest down to the youngest, and you'll see that. And by the way, this very heavy blue line is a predominance or excess male population. Most countries seem to have excess male population, but you'll see that India has got a very good dispersion of ages from the very youngest to the oldest, and there's no gap, which indicates that there's going to be a growing population for some years, decades to come, decades all the way from 6 decades ahead of us, 7 decades ahead of us to our present day. So, and the birth rate is phenomenal. It's 16 births per 1,000 population. So the growth rate is going to be high. 0.68% growth rate is relatively high. The one fly in the ointment there is infant mortality is very high. And that is because there is so much fourth world in India. So India is a fourth world, a third world, a second world, and a first world. And, it's a relatively small but rapidly growing first world. And that fourth world is really not yet beginning to decline because the country hasn't become, as wealthy as it really needs to be. But look at China. China has real disruptions in its population. And that's why India just surpassed China's population. And China's population is actually going to decline, and it's going to start declining in this generation here. When you get down to the 60-year-olds and below, there's already a decline in population. But when you get to the 40s and below, there's going to be a very dramatic decline in population. In the US, we've got a fairly even dispersion, not as great as China's, as India's, but a fairly good dispersion with relatively few interruptions. But we have a very low infant mortality rate, not as low as Europe, but a relatively low infant mortality rate, and really good immigration, which keeps our growth path of population up. But all of this has consequences. It has real consequences to the population and ultimately to GDP growth, which is the wealth of the country. And that we can see quite clearly in the slide. We'll see that from the 50s to 2023, the Indian population, which is this orange line here, was below the population of China. But this year, we crossed the bar. And India population is growing while China's population, you remember those demographics, will start declining. And that's why we think, sorry, go ahead now.
And aging as well. So where you're going to have fewer individuals trying to support the aging population, which is the problem around the world. I don't care whether that's Europe or Japan, South Korea, Russia, all facing that same dilemma. Japan, I don't know if you guys are aware of it, over the last 5 years, are bringing in immigrants for the very first time. It is one of the most pure populations in the world. Almost, we used to be 99% Japanese purity, if you will, and now they're bringing in literally hundreds of thousands of immigrants in order to make sure they have enough people to run the company, run the business.
And immigration has been the secret to the success of the United States.
Yeah.
In terms of the wealth of the country. Now, population growth and growing education standards and growing economies result in what? Growing wealth. And here is US wealth in the blue bars, the US GDP compared to European GDP. You'll see European GDP is growing very slowly. Europe has a couple of things against it. The one is very, very poor population demographics. The other is, very, very tight controls over the economy, resulting in much lower growth. The United States has boisterous growth compared to them. But look at China. China's been growing pretty well, but we're really past that exponential point. We're actually going to be leveling out from the exponential growth point. In fact, I think this projection is even optimistic. But look at the Indian situation. India is in that, it's in that elbow up towards exponential growth. And that's what's happening in India right now. We're just at that point of takeoff of exponential growth.
I think if we drop back for a second to the China growth, I think that graph is extremely optimistic.
Yes.
It's not just optimistic. I mean, they've got, besides the population, they've got all these issues with regard to, what we'll be talking about today, that there's going to be companies looking to at least have a backup plan with regard to China in their manufacturing, but maybe to move out of China for a whole raft of reasons. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
Randy, no, I agree with you. I will tell you that for the last 20, 25 years, the theme has been that within 10 years, China's GDP is going to surpass that of the United States. And I think it'll be always 10 years away. Right. And it may actually expand to 20 years away. I think that China has reached the apogee, and I think we're going to see this leveling off now pretty rapidly because things aren't getting better. But, India still has challenges. And one of the great challenges that very rapidly growing countries have is infrastructure. So, Nehal, talk to us about infrastructure in India.
Right. So improving incomes are very much.
Can you get closer to the mic or something? You're.
Yeah, you've got a little bit soft.
Yeah, improving incomes. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah. This is good.
Okay. Improving incomes are definitely happening. What is happening also is the tax base is also expanding. India has some new policies to collect various different taxes that did not exist before. All of that money is now put back into the infrastructure. You can see here on this chart, and all of this data mostly comes from open sources like Wikipedia and such. So a bunch of it is verified, but some of it may not be. Relatively, it is pretty accurate from first glance. You can see that the transportation, this is showing you the chart for the road infrastructure expanding. In the last decade and the decade before, you can see the rate of growth. I mean, you're expanding the road transport network in rural areas by 72% in a decade. It is a very big leap to the next level. I
just want to point out three figures that I'm reading from the chart now. Mm-hmm. National highways in 2010 to 2011 was 70,934. I guess that's kilometers or miles?
Yes.
Kilometers.
Yeah, kilometers.
In 2015 to 2016, it was 101,000. 50% in those 5 years.
Yeah.
And 5 years later, another 50%. It's growing at the rate of 50% in 5 years. I mean, that's a phenomenal rate of growth of highways. Go ahead. Go ahead.
The blue lines you are seeing here on the map of India are 4 different arms of different highways. It's called Golden Quadrilateral project, and that is basically becoming the thoroughfare for business. The quality of those roads and the traffic you see on those roads is phenomenal, because we only go every year back from US back to India, and I belong to Gujarat. Every time we go, we see something new, some new breakthrough that was impossible to even think about when we had visited just last year or year before. So historically, India has had a lot of train transport. People would jump on a train and travel for 12, 16, 18 hours to get from one corner of the country to the other corner. Now that whole infrastructure, the whole method of travel is changing, and very rapidly changing. Like I was saying earlier, 2 and 3 wheelers are prevalent, but for intercity travel, you see these 4 vehicles going everywhere. The size of the vehicles are increasing. The price and the quality of those vehicles are also increasing. As we look at some of those numbers in the next slide, you will see how up until the financial year 2019, up until that year, there is a steady increase in the number of vehicles sold. Then pandemic happens, and India had a setback. But when it comes back, you can see how it went back again, and it came back roaring. With all of this happening, there is definitely a sudden rise in 4-wheel vehicles. There is a sudden rise in also EV adoption, believe it or not. This is making India the 3rd largest country behind China as we swing from not so mobile to highly mobile urban populations.
Okay.
And
yeah. So, what we did is start examining what cars were being sold in India, because that's of interest, because we'd seen these tiny little cars. I'd go to India, 2 or 3 times a year. Initially, recently it's only been 1 time a year, but we'd see these tiny little cars. I tell a story that my colleagues, when I started in India 12, 15 years ago, used to drive around on little 2-wheelers, and then graduated to these tiny little cars. They had 4 wheels, but each on the little corner of the car. And then suddenly they were driving, larger cars and more elegant cars, and times were changing. When I go to India, I always have a car and driver provided to me, and I think that's a fairly standard thing for a business person visiting India. It's very difficult to drive in India, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But if we look at the cars that are being sold in India today, what they call budget cars are marked at the 9.8K to 17K number. And what they call premium cars are marked in the 22 to 42K market. So we think that at the high end of the budget car, the Tesla under 25K car will begin to fit in, and definitely at the low end of the premium car. So given it's an electric car, given the cost of running an electric car, we think that the car, the Tesla, the new Tesla model will fit nicely in the sort of budget area, and will definitely fit very well. And even the Model 3 and the Model Y will fit very nicely in the premium car category. And we think there's a fair market for those. Do you agree with that, Nehal?
Yeah. And by the way, the little car that you were mentioning earlier happens to be the number 1 selling car on the next. Maruti Suzuki was established just around the time I was probably born, in the 80s sometime, I guess, maybe earlier. Somebody please fact check that. It's an 800cc engine displacement. Back in the day, it was a gasoline only car. And to give you perspective on 800cc, the smallest motorcycle produced by Harley Davidson is 883. So that's how small these cars are.
But and so they sold 1.5 million of those cars, and that's understandable. But what opened my eyes was Hyundai's sales, 552,000.
Yeah.
And this is in a market growing at almost 10% per annum. And so when you look at the Hyundai range, you see that it is in Tesla's sweet spot, absolute sweet spot, because the best-selling Hyundai car is this car called the Creta, and the price of the Creta is right there in that sweet spot of the forthcoming Tesla model. And so we think that there's obviously a very significant market for that car, even without exports.
Now, Nehal, let me ask you, is there a desire to own a car? Do the people in India, I mean, I understand that you have all four worlds, first world to fourth world in India. You have sections of India that are as different from each other as they would be to a country in South America or something. But in general, would you say that there's a desire? Is this something that people are aspiring to? Is to own their own automobile?
Absolutely. So some of that has to do with the socioeconomics of owning a car. It happens to be a status symbol. Which make and model, says something about you as a consumer, right? That aside, though, more and more people are, like I was saying earlier, more and more mobile. These big old highways cannot accommodate the 2- and 3-wheelers anymore. So there is absolutely an explosion in four-wheelers, being purchased by retailers. But then there's also large networks like Ubers. There are some local car, what do you call it? The cars for hire market. Like there's a player called Ola. And there are networks of cars that they will just buy in bulk, right? So yes, short answer to your question is there is lots of desire. There's also a lot of just need-based demand and appetite. You can see the range of the sizes, the form factors. They'll tell you the story here.
Yeah, and this is the same range of Hyundais we have in this country. It's no different.
Yeah.
Now the trend will be towards the lower cost cars in India, dramatically lower cost than the trend would be in the United States. But nonetheless, the same factors driving car ownership in the US exist in India. I will say that in our area where Nehal and I live, the number of Teslas are just, it's out of control. Like every second car you see is a Tesla. And by the way, every second Tesla you see is driven by an Indian driver.
Mm.
All those engineers that come from India, and that are like such an important component to our high-tech world here we live in what we call the Research Triangle Park in North Carolina, and this is where all the research happens because we're in the confluence of these three great universities. And so we have a huge Indian population. In fact, my town, Kerry, has the reputation of having the highest number of highest percentage of doctorates in the population. And so every second car you see is a Tesla, and every second Tesla is being driven by an Indian. So I think that kind of gives you the color, and it gives you the sense of how well Tesla is going to be doing in India. But EVs are not new in India. EVs are already in India. They're there. And so
equivalent to our Model 3 sellout stories and our Cybertruck sellout stories, right? Pre-registration, you can see that article on the slide. It shows 10,000. Well, 10,000 for them happens to be the high mark for how many orders they want to collect. But they did make the goal of collecting all those orders pre-production. There are already tie-ups happening. I don't claim to be an expert on these matters, especially in India, but I'm following it from here, from a distance, and I can see all these tie-ups happening, all these startups springing up, trying to provide what is missing. What is missing is the vertical integration of generation, storage, transport. It does not exist today.
Right.
That's right.
Now,
And-
now I'm going to take a little tangent here because Tony Seba has famously said that India could completely transfer to 100% electrification for I believe it was $10 trillion. And if you divide that by the population, that would mean $10 a person per year for 10 years. So is there a governmental inclination to follow China's footsteps and become electrified as quickly as possible and to build out the electrical and or EV infrastructure?
I'm aware of the momentum already happening. I'm not aware of at which speed these guys are moving. I'm making a visit back to India sometime in September, not too far in the future. I will try and make an attempt to find out everything I can. I'm rooting for my homeland, obviously, because it is not only a story of how can we give you a better car, it's also a story of how can we reduce the cost per mile. And being cost conscious, that economy can actually greatly benefit from it. But like I keep saying, infrastructure happens to be that weak link. I'm not sure if it's the correct statement sitting from here. So I will do some work and get back to you on that. But getting back on the track, what could be the plan for Tesla? If I were Tesla, what am I thinking? The brain trust at Tesla is enormous. So Larry and I thought, let's put together a plan, however biased, and see if we can make a case for this happening. And the next slide will
really it talks about what? It talks about the market for right-hand drive cars.
Ah, yes.
So when you think about India was part of the British Raj. It was part of the British Empire, right? And these countries marked in blue are all the countries, plus Japan, that were part of the British Empire and that were, drove on the wrong side of the road, right? Which means that if you're manufacturing cars in India, these are the ideal export markets for India. We think there's a huge market for this new model that's coming from Tesla, plus the Model 3, plus the Model Y in India. But there's also the possibility of exporting to these countries, and the homologation is going to be so much easier than it is out of China. And, then China won't have to stop its production line to switch over it would be much better to export from India into this market.
Is Japan more open to Indian-made products than they are to Chinese-made products?
You would guess so.
You would guess it. Well, we know they're not open to Chinese-made products at all. So any step would be an improvement. I just wonder if there's any. Do we have any actual knowledge that that there's much exporting going from India to Japan?
I don't know about that, but let me make a comment. Let's go back to Maruti Suzuki, right? India has been open, and I don't see why a better product cannot penetrate all the way into Japan, even if it came out of India.
Yeah. We can assume that all of these countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, Australia, the Philippines, all of these would be much happier to be getting their car, and South Korea would all be much happier. Did I mention Taiwan? Would be much, although Taiwan's left-hand drive, right?
Yeah, Taiwan's left-hand drive.
Okay.
So Taiwan right now are getting their cars out of Fremont.
Fremont, yes. Okay.
I don't think that will change. So yeah, I honestly think that this is, a natural, absolute natural, because China will continue selling to Europe and the Middle East, and to all of the sort of Central Asian states, and to South America. But India will be the natural place. So I, as convinced as I am that the Indian market is ready for Tesla, this is another play that Tesla will have open to them. I mean, Southern Africa is a very large market, currently untapped, and so it goes. So, I think that there's clearly an opportunity here from Tesla's point of view of providing the cars. But when you think about the whole energy transition that Nehal mentioned, and the need for batteries, the need for charging infrastructure, the need for move to solar, and the opportunity for Megapack, the whole transition, India, the transition for India will be as critical as the transition in any country of the world. And given, that it's, such a large percentage, 10% of the world population, it's a very critical transition.
Right. Okay. So what about, what are the negatives? I know this is my optimistic channel. Everybody comes here to only hear good news. But are there any negatives associated with the Tesla effort? We know that there's geopolitical and what do you want to call it, governmental reasons why Tesla would want to hedge their bet in China and have a second Asia manufacturing capability. But what would you say are some of the, you've operated in India, Larry, you've lived in India, now what, and Larry as well, what are some of the negatives that they might be facing?
Bureaucracy.
So the bigger the opportunity, the bigger the challenges, right?
Yeah.
In this case, we have kind of put our heads together on the next slide and looked at some of the challenges that are ahead of Tesla. Bureaucracy happens to be number one. The political climate, I don't claim to know. I honestly do not. So I can't speak to that. Until I'm on the ground and I have more information, I'd like to hold some of those opinions back. This slide actually covers the challenges and opportunities, right? So the biggest challenge is, because you specifically asked for it, is where are the batteries? Are we making enough batteries that can feed that new hungry market, right? Now that you have batteries, maybe you can solve that, but now that you have batteries, you're going to have to charge them. And historically, Tesla has brought the supercharger ahead of the product.
Yes.
Well, in this case, as Larry will point out, there is no supercharging. There is no import happening in India. That whole pathway is blocked. And Larry, can you please?
Well, we know.
Yeah,
we know.
Yeah.
Let me just interrupt for a second. We know that a huge amount of lithium comes out of Australia. We know that Indonesia, right next door, and I think they're pretty friendly with India, they have the nickel. So maybe Tesla would need a refinery, or maybe they'd need to help somebody establish a refinery in India, and they could solve that problem.
Well, lithium mining has just been, after the slide was done, the government announced that they were going to allow lithium mining in India. This is absolutely new, hot off the press.
Wow.
The question is, where are the reserves, and how long will it take to create a mine? I mean, everything in India takes longer. Everything.
Longer than Germany? Longer than Germany?
Yes.
Okay.
Longer than Germany. Longer than Mexico, longer than China. Everything in India takes longer. That's just the reality. Now, am I wrong?
Unless you get the government behind you, right, with a mission. So I want to say that the success of the story is how the story will be told, right, and how the story will be sold. So when these negotiations are happening, who has a seat at the table? What are the roadmaps being offered? The incentives being offered to each party? I think that will determine this. I have actually followed up on a couple of battery manufacturers back home. I have followed up on lithium mining as well. But let's not forget the special material, the demand for all these exotic materials is actually dying down, because we are now going to LFP. So the old style lithium ion batteries are becoming obsolete now with LFP. It has a cost advantage. It is also vastly more available. I'm not really sure where all the lithium will come from, but all I can say is, given the right environment and somebody putting the momentum into this, the opportunity is really big.
Yeah, I think so. I just want to put a little warning note in. Ever since Congress Party in India finally was voted out of office, we've had this gigantic growth in the Indian economy under the last 3 prime ministers. Some people don't like their politics, they don't like their this, they don't like it, but we've seen this tremendous growth. Indian politics, India is a very messy democracy. If we think we're a messy democracy, try India. It's not one democracy, it's many different democracies. There are provincial governments, and then there's a central government, and then there's multiple layers of bureaucracy. I don't want to get too complicated here, but it is complicated. So I would say that, I hope nobody's listening, but that's the biggest single problem in India. But, there are other problems in India. Let's talk about FSD. I mean, Nehal, do you want to comment on FSD in India?
Ashok is leading. Before I make this comment, though, isn't this one of the last puzzles to be solved for Tesla? I mean, at this point, Tesla is everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
So there must be a footprint they can dig up with all of the brain trust they have, right, and make an honest attempt at solving this challenge. And if for nothing else, this plays to the mission statement.
Yeah.
It is not that Tesla needs India; it is that India needs Tesla.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Nehal. And from what I know of Tesla, they have the right team in India, talking to India. Their new CFO is actually on the board of the Indian company, and he is from India. And there are other very, very, very influential members of the management that have very strong relationships with India. So I think Tesla are savvy enough, and they've proved it in China. My word, they've done so well in China. They've proved it that they can, become native to the country, and they can pay their respect to the culture of the country. So I have a high level of confidence, but I don't want people to underestimate the challenge.
Right. Right. Yes, of course.
And then as we speak of challenges, right? So we have been waiting for years now, coming up on probably a decade, that we are hearing FSD will be solved this year or yesteryear or next year. Well, FSD will truly be a dream. I do not want to dream that there will be a Tesla car on the road. I want to dream that FSD makes it to India. And let's see what kind of challenges we have. Literally on the screen. as we try to solve that.
You know, if you want to talk about a challenge to FSD, I mean, Ashok said it, you know, the leader of the FSD team said that he dreams that he could make FSD work in India. You know, to understand what it would be like to make FSD work in India, I've taken this little 1-minute video, a little outtake of a 1-minute video of traffic in India. And, you know, this is quite an old video, so that, you know, slightly older, but I want you to look at some of the features of the screen. There's a little white car peeking out of this road here. You'll notice this traffic is going, you know, in this direction, and the traffic on this lane is going in this direction. And this car, I want you to watch this car and see what it does. And then I want you to see
absence of road markings.
No road
markings, yeah.
Left-hand
no
side.
road markings.
Traffic
And
light.
I also want you to see that this stream of car, interestingly enough, want to turn right. No traffic light, right? No traffic light, no road markings, and a stream of traffic. And so let's see this thing run. Let's see it run. See the white car peeking out. Oops. The white car is turning right. This stream of traffic is turning into the other stream of traffic. Somehow, magically, they seem to oh, look at this white car, straight against the traffic, turning. He wants to make, you know, he wants to cross the road, just turns against the traffic. You'll notice this enormous, you know, bunch of cars. How are they ever going to sort it out? How is this guy ever going to get across? I mean, how's this going to happen? But, you know, something magic happens, and somehow or another, there he goes, and he crosses the road, and the stream of traffic crosses. How does it all happen? Now, that's the reason I don't drive in India.
Well, now it's not the only place, by the way. Taiwan is no piece of cake. No, most people will not drive in New York City, and Rome, give me a break. That place is crazy. So there are plenty of challenges, but I think India probably does take the cake.
Probably takes the cake, because I've driven in Rome. I've driven in Taiwan.
Have you? Wow.
Oh, yeah. It's not a problem for me. Taiwan compared to India is easy. So,
Now,
yeah.
many roads are much different today. You can see a lot of improvement. You can see a lot of people following the rules. But regardless of all of this, when Ashok said he wants to solve it, it is not just that he wants to bring FSD there. He wants to bring his baby back home. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, so obviously in many countries, even in the United States, I think as FSD becomes a thing, as robotaxis become a thing, we're going to see changes in road markings. We're going to see changes in signage. We're going to see changes in even rules in terms of what can and cannot happen. So I'm quite confident that now, Larry, I've been told in Taiwan when I was visiting there that the rule in Taiwan is the biggest vehicle has the right of way. And I sat up above the traffic in a hotel and watched this, you know, where the truck had the right of way over the bus, which had the right of way over a car, and right down to the pedestrian, which had absolutely no right of way. So
I actually didn't know that rule. I thought that the rule, having driven there, I thought the rule was the bravest car has the right of way.
Well, no, that's New York, and even San Francisco to a great degree.
Well, you know, those are, I mean, driving in New York actually is, you know, it's really simple. I mean, but when you get to Rome, you know, it's all about eye contact. It's all about making sure that there's eye contact, and, you know, but India's whole different. So one of the, you know, one of the rules of the road in India is you honk when you come behind a car so that the guy in the car knows you're behind him. The result is there's this unending stream of honking which means you have no idea where anybody is.
Right. Well,
Their driving is actually, I would not qualify their driving as aggressive. Their driving, the style of driving is extremely graceful, right?
I see. Yeah.
You're all the way down. You're passing this baton down the line.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
looking in each other's eyes. You
Yes.
are doing your own traffic cop work. But what comes out of it is this chaotic situation. To an untrained eye, it looks absolutely a crazy situation.
All right. So
I just wanted to tell you a brief story. I took a colleague. He was our CIO, newly joined technologist. Took him to India the first time to introduce him to the team, and he was completely, bewildered by this driving. He said, "They must have terrible accidents. It must be terrible." And he asked the team, there were about 15 of us sitting around a table. He said, "Aren't there terrible accidents?" "Oh," they said, "never. There's never an accident." So he, being who he is, went back and checked the numbers. The death tolls are terrible. I mean, it's incredibly high level of accidents. And anyway,
yes.
But
they're all they're all fender benders because they're only going 12 miles an hour.
There's a lot of people who.
All right. So let me ask as the final part of this particular round, because I think we'll probably have a round two.
Sure.
With regard to this particular round, what about the other two companies on the table? So mostly we're looking right now at Indonesia and Malaysia. Maybe you guys are not qualified. I don't know if you are to talk about this choice or how this might play out, but I just thought I'd put it on the table. Indonesia, just the other day, I think was it their premier or president, whatever, somebody, Indonesian president, said, we'll have an answer by the end of the year, whether there's going to be a $1 billion factory built in Indonesia. Malaysia apparently is now the headquarters of South Asian sales, something of that nature. They're the headquarters of maybe a strategic headquarters, which may open up opportunities for Malaysia in the future for some kind of manufacturing. India seemed to have the inside lane, so to speak. So what do you guys know about this competition between the three countries? Oh boy.
I have no idea, because none of us have any idea. And any of us who may have any idea certainly wouldn't be, I think, would be ill-advised to speak about it. My own personal judgment, without any inside knowledge, is that India is the right place to put the factory. And if I were to build a factory in India, I would put it in the state of Gujarat. Just because it is such a productive place to do business, particularly manufacturing business or technical business. That's where Nehal happens to come from. I don't know, Nehal, do you want to opine on any of this?
So I'd start with agreeing with you. Gujarat happens to be that place that is on the cusp of bringing a lot of growth to the country in many different ways, and I can give you so many different examples. In terms of just speaking about solar energy, we have a very long canal that brings water from a reservoir to far-stretching areas in the state, and a leading politician came up with this idea and actually did case studies on how about we cover that canal with solar panels. Very simple. We're going to lose the water from evaporating. We are going to get all of this energy that then feeds into how to bring that water from the canal itself, bringing it into the farm, because we do have power cuts. Like in the different periods when the farmers need water, they are given a priority in who gets the electricity first. Anyway, so I would root for my mother state, my mother country, absolutely. But I have also seen these innovations happen, and I've been to different parts of the country and heard people talk extremely fondly about where I come from and their curiosity in what my state has to offer. Look at the coastline, look at the infrastructure in terms of ports, the railways, right? The labor force we have, all the engineering schools we have, the transportation we have to offer. Speaking of all of that, I would definitely root for it. And there's a pretty clear case for why Tesla belongs in Gujarat.
Yeah, you will not find the level of depth of engineering and technical skills in any of these other countries that you mentioned. And you wouldn't find the communities of software genius in any of those other communities. And it's kind of like choosing Austin, rather than Oklahoma or it's that kind of thing.
No disrespect to Oklahoma, by the way.
No disrespect at all to Oklahoma. I mean, I try to push North Carolina on Tesla.
Yes.
And we made a bit of a cut. We didn't make the bottom line, but the point is, the level of skill, the level, just the engineering talent and the infrastructure, not only the physical infrastructure, but the intellectual infrastructure in India is so powerful.
Yeah.
So that's why I think that India has got the nose.
And also, I'm going to really show my ignorance here. India is the main language, the official language, English?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Do you know how many languages there are in India?
No, I know there's a lot. I just wonder what people speak.
Yeah. So English happens to be predominantly common language because there are 100 plus other languages, regional languages.
Yeah.
Then there is the national language, which is Hindi. So means of conducting day-to-day business, I have seen English pretty prevalent. It's pretty common to hear it coast to coast and whatnot. The engineers we talk about are not just that they are geniuses, it is also that they are tenacious. If you put them behind a task, these guys will not go home until they solve it.
That's right. That's right. I
can
attest to that. I mean, that's why I love my teams. That's why I love my teams in India. That's why I am so comfortable doing business there, that despite the bureaucracy, despite the complexity of the roads, and despite, the fourth world that one has to sort of navigate through, the intellectual comfort of working in India, of building in India, is just so satisfying to our Western culture and habits that it just makes a lot of sense. And so, I'm not underestimating Malaysia, and I'm certainly not underestimating Indonesia. Both are fantastic countries, but if I were to build an auto plant, I would build it in India.
As you've already proven, because you already have had 2 businesses there. Hey, guys, this has been great. As I said, we might want to come back on another occasion. First of all, love to have everybody's comments, questions. What are you thinking about in terms of India? What questions do you have about India or about the decision-making process that might be going on at Tesla? I realize, of course, that, so many people at Tesla are listening to these programs and making their decisions based on what Larry and I tell them to do.
Or not.
Although Larry might have a little more of a backdoor than I do. We do want to hear your questions. We do want to hear your comments, because we could do a part 2. And in a part 2, I think we're also, I want to take a little bigger look at the entire Asian continent and what it is about so many people needing backup plan for China? We talked a little bit about population and the economy, but what about the political parts of it? What about the feelings about the different countries with regard to each other? You know, who does and who doesn't like to trade, who does and doesn't fear their northern neighbor. Anyway, thanks again, guys. Very good to meet you, Nehal, and look forward to another conversation. Larry, as always, great to have you on board. If you liked this very different show today, please hit like, please hit subscribe, please hit notify, and follow Larry at Tesla Larry. Hey, Nehal, are you on Twitter? I'm sorry, on X, formerly known as Twitter.
I am extremely. I have been a private person. I'd like to disclose my Twitter handle on one of the following episodes.
Okay.
I would welcome you guys to drop any questions you guys have, all the watchers. We are Larry here and Randy. I'll do everything I can on my upcoming visit to follow up and try and find answers to your curiosities from
Great.
India.
All right. Thank you, guys. And for all of those of you in the listening audience, it has been great talking to you.
Click the link below to get your paperback, Kindle, or audiobook now.